Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And one of the things you see if you follow musicians on social media a lot is that a lot of them like to paint, and a lot of them are quite good at it. That makes sense to me. We no longer seem to, as a culture, just refer to arts as visual arts for a reason. The urge to create is not confined to one medium, and especially if you're in the business of having memorable album art, then chances are a little purely visual psychedelia is also up your alley. So 6 years ago and now when we lost both David Bowie and Alan Rickman, I remember Billy Bragg noting that both were working class kids who benefited from a culture in England at the time and an economic system, I get, where even people who might not make it into other kinds of post-secondary education had a chance, if they had the right skill set, of going to an affordable, I guess possibly free art school. So I'm going to talk today about some famous rock and roll folk musicians who have also produced art over the years. And we're going to start with someone who went to those art schools, Mr. John Lennon. So his reputation as one of music's great intellectuals didn't translate into him being motivated when he was in high school. So without the option to go to academic university, he nonetheless was able to find his way into the Liverpool College of Art. He wasn't particularly motivated there either, and it would seem, compared to many of his other colleagues on this list, he kept his artistic talents, his visual artistic talents, largely to himself. I guess he favored truth and grit over pretension of showing off that he could run an art gallery or whatever. So largely what he put out were, I think, intentionally simple line drawings. I mean, they might be the kind of thing you'd see in New Yorker cartoons, but you don't necessarily see them and assume the person went to art school, even though there's a lot of fun and whimsy to them. So I particularly like this one captioned "Power to the People," partially actually because of the mystery of it. It's hard to tell if the person in the suit sort of represents the corporate character in America, or if anything, by dressing up the Statue of Liberty and giving it this masculine or androgynous look, he's sort of subverting propriety. It's hard to know exactly what's going on, and that's what I like about it. So when I look at John Lennon's art, there's a lot of stuff that's very colorful, but at least to my eye, the color looks kind of modern. And what I can't tell is how much of the color is John's vision and how much of it is his line drawings been filled in, because apparently Yoko formatted them as prints. And I mean, that's a cool idea. It's, a great idea for this creative couple to build on each other's art. It's just for the purpose of this little list here, it's hard to say how much of the art is John's and how much of it is Yoko building on John's initial concept or some other artist working for the family. So after John, another product of the art school system, as I've already mentioned, is David Bowie. And unlike John, David Bowie was not afraid to be lavish and show off his ambitions in all kinds of artistic fields, acting on stage and screen and holding galleries of his work. And when I look at his work, I think, yeah, this guy's a pretty good painter. The one thing is, it's not unique in the same way as music is, because I feel like I've seen it before with the likes of Picasso and Chagall and all their stylistic similars who you'll see at an art gallery. That said, his weirdly evil-looking self-portraits from middle age are pretty cool. But one piece that really stood out to me was Squeeze. And I guess by bringing this graffiti-esque text over his otherwise Picasso and Chagall-like work, he's creating a slightly distinct aesthetic here. So a lot of good paintings from Bowie. This is the one I picked as my favorite. Paul McCartney also had a painting career. Now, it wasn't brought to my attention until I discovered that the cover to the Egypt Station record used one of his paintings. McCartney's range of work, his style, it strikes me as pretty similar to David Bowie. And in fact, he has this weird little picture of David Bowie that he painted. I particularly like that the guy who sang the Her Majesty ditty at the end of Abbey Road has this slightly irreverent, but not too offensive, Queen Elizabeth trilogy. And while generally more of a modern painter, you can see some of the technical skills and the potential to do more realism in some of McCartney's work. So you obviously have this very cartoonish picture called Boxer Lips here, but the effort that went into painting these lips is clearly quite focused, and it creates quite an intense effect. One more McCartney painting I wanted to highlight was called Ancient Connections. It has a color palette kind of similar to Egypt Station, and I just think drawing these three faces in three different styles, three different levels of realism, pretty cool. Joni Mitchell, from what I've heard, actually sees herself as more of a painter than a songwriter. And I guess that's pretty cool. You don't define yourself by what you're famous for. You define yourself by what you see as strongest art. Now, that said, Joni Mitchell did, I don't know if it was all, but a lot of her album covers. And between the different albums, you can see sort of two styles. So she does these sort of very accomplished, on the way to realist paintings on the one hand, what you see as early as her Clouds album, but then she also does these drawings that use a lot of lines and a few vivid colors, but combined with negative space. And you also see this with some of her other paintings. So Self-Portrait Keyboard, for instance, is that sort of lines and colors style, which I actually like a bit better. But then she can also do
Or filled in, painted, really impressive kind of works, like In My Dreams We Fly.
Joan Baez's painting career is one that I almost confused with George W. Bush's. I think they started teaching themselves to paint around the same time, the protest singer and the neocon president. And, they both do slightly stylized, but fairly realistic portrait. And it's certainly an impressive talent. When it's the same thing every time, it's still impressive, but maybe not as interesting. I also feel like Joan Baez's choice of these heroes that she says she paints, I think it's a bit too influenced by the memes in the media. Don't get me wrong, I'm very much on the left, but sometimes she seems like one of these people who, anyone who stands up to Trump, she holds as a hero. Whereas, I'd like to be a bit more selective than that. That said, I really like her painting of Michael Moore, where she came up with the choice to add a jester hat. And also this one of her friend David Crosby. This one's a bit more surreal than some of her other portraits, because you see him kind of fading into the background, and he clearly liked it a lot because he made it the album cover for his most recent album for free. Buffy Saintemarie. She is not, as I know, a painter, but she did dabble in digital art, and you can find these pieces on her website. And it kind of echoes the trend in the second half of her musical career, which reliably centers Indigenous political struggles, despite starting as a folk singer, using modern sort of techno sounds, a lot of synthesizers. And it might just be, she has her political cause and her musical taste, but there's this kind of implication that these people who are stereotyped as primitive and savage and of the past, she's saying, no, our resistance can be futuristic and rocking. And this comes out in her art as well, which plays up an overly computery aesthetic with images from various indigenous cultures. So I particularly like this self-portrait ayahuasca jaguar. Now onto Bobby Dylan. So Bob Dylan's painting was discovered by the world, I believe, when he did cover art for his album Self-Portrait. And this is obviously a simplistic painting. And it almost fits with Bob Dylan, the guy who proved you could be a great singer without a great voice. Is he now going to try and be a painter without having a realist talent? Since then, however, apparently Bob Dylan, really took to painting. He took painting lessons and aimed for more realism. In fact, his teacher, according to the website that sells his works, emphasized perceptual honesty, which I think is a pretty core idea in a lot of art teaching. When I was given a few tips once, that was the idea, where you have to teach yourself not to draw what you think things look like, but just to really look at them and paint what you see. And generally, Dylan paints with a style that reminds me a bit of Van Gogh, a bit of Matisse, though with a lot of Americana subject matter. But judging from this particular painting, Under the Bridge, which I think is his sort of most structural, most realist thing I've seen of them all, his ambitions have really taken him in this direction of more and more realism. I guess kind of like he put out 3 albums of Sinatra covers to prove to the world, look, I really can sing. Just because I sing in an Americana style doesn't mean I can sing. At the same time, he's saying, look, just because I painted this stylistically simple self-portrait cover art doesn't mean I can't also be a really technically good painter. Stevie Nicks doesn't appear to have the same ambitions of a second career as some of the other people on this list. If anything, she seems to underplay her talent, but apparently when her friend Robin Anderson was dying of leukemia, she became inspired to paint for an angel. And on the little bit I found about her art, she says, "I only paint angels." But this was the piece that came out. It's called Rhiannon. Very intricate for someone who claims that that was the moment she started painting. Very impressive debut. Cat Stevens. So like Joni Mitchell, he's someone whose artistic character is obvious because he designed a lot of his own cover art and the inside of album sleeves in a way that's consistent with, his early songs or early mid songs on Tea for the Tillerman, Teaser and the Firecat. They have a kind of children's story or nursery rhyme quality to them where there's a certain simplicity if you look at the individual parts of the drawing, but overall the drawing is quite lively and intricate. Cat Stevens is also someone who could go between various styles. So if you look at this illustration based on the idea for his Catch Bullet 4 album, this is a different style of drawing than you see elsewhere. And he also did a lot of sort of pen and pencil kind of work. Take this gothic caricature of the Dickensian factory owner characters from his record Matthew and Son. Next, we have Robyn Hitchcock. So his is a musical career that really can't be separated from his visual one, since so many of his songs sound like descriptions of surrealist paintings. You have titles like Balloon Man, One Long Pair of Eyes, Lost Madonna of the Wasp, Globe of Frogs, and some of those he has drawn or painted over the years. I was particularly taken by this series of paintings, which he sold in part for the National Independent Talent Organization to support artists during COVID. So he's clearly someone who can do wonderful things with the color green and imagine lively, intrigued little creatures inside very simple shapes. To conclude my list, Sydbarrett, like Joni Mitchell, saw himself as more of a visual artist than a musician, even if the world primarily knew him as the other. And I guess this explains why his contributions to Pink Floyd felt more like psychedelic trips than true pop or rock songs. Tendency that I think the rest of Pink Floyd took even farther and a bit too much after he left the band. So Barrett, like John Lennon, like David Bowie, another art school kid, and he could do technically good drawings. So I like this just black and white one from the beginning, Portrait of a Girl. But of course, because of his psychedelic tendencies, he liked doing less realistic works. Lions is another pretty cool one. Red and green abstract. This is the kind of thing I feel like I occasionally see in an abstract section at a museum, where it's almost like a subgenre, where even though it's abstract, it almost looks like it's some real thing, like a diagram of a cell or a weird womb or something. And to conclude this video, I thought I'd show maybe the simplest looking painting of them all, Green and Red Landscape. A piece painted with what looks like minimal skill, but I think it's with an intentional, charming simplicity. I like the magenta streak, if only because I see magenta, I think basically pink. I think Pink Floyd in the landscape, taking in a grassy knoll. I just listened to Atom Heart Mother, which Sydbarrett wasn't part of, but the idea of drawing the psychedelic from the simple, from the everyday or simple idea of a grassy field. I don't know, that's what I appreciate about this work. But anyway, let me know if there are other musicians as painters who you particularly like, interesting works I haven't mentioned. I guess I also know that Ronniewood sometimes seems to paint his fellow Rolling Stones, and he does marker drawn. He writes out the set list for their concert in marker, not too much painting there, but looks very pretty. But yeah, any other ideas, throw them in the comments below. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von Bee. See you next time.